Good day to you. This is Ada Galactic giving you the secrets of the universe, which is quite a grandiose thing to claim to impart. But tonight we're wrapping up a series where we've been leading up to this grand conclusion, the divulgence of one of the most important secrets, I claim the most important of all, for logical reasons having to do with hierarchical ordering of otherwise incommensurable systems which seem to comprise the human race. We're just stuck with this strange situation in our involute position to try to figure out our environment, of which there are two. So we're using a double system of logic and emotion, essentially love, although you should include fun, I believe, because that's also irrational. The very basis of happiness itself is illogical. That doesn't mean it's bad. And in fact, that's profound because illogic is not evil. There is a context in which illogic is evil, and that's called the scientific process, where you're not allowed to use illogic at all, so it's quite restricted. Now, what I've done is unified religion and science in the only possible way, which turns out, of course, to be profound. The simple things are profound, and the greatest insights are the simplest things. The unified field solution, I know from experience, is a solution of that sort. So is the quantum of gravity, and so is the collapse of the wave function. Those at one time, about 4 years ago, were not only insoluble problems to me, but I didn't fully know that they even existed. So I've come a long way very quickly with this brand new geometry, which unlocks the secrets of physics and its underlying number system, which is so revolutionary, I claim it ushers in a new age of science itself. But tonight we're looking at the other side of human life in order to discuss the other course of action which we're forced to. No matter what we think of ourselves as scientists, we are required to pursue every course to get the answers that we require, which means you have to focus on what is your question, because you can't solve a problem if you can't define what it is. Well, that has been part of our existential problem. We're not sure what the problem is, but there's definitely a problem. There's an inconsistency in the system in which we're involute. We can see that happiness is real. We understand that pleasure is preferable to pain. We learn about love and fun, and the gifts of what are called the gifts of the Holy Spirit are an excellent list of what you could derive by just using rational logic. Applied to the human emotional system, you would derive the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Those are what you want. They're available, they're real, but the opposites of each one are equally real. And this dismays us and leads us toward religious solutions, which are ridiculed now, and that is part of the problem. It never should have happened. Scientists have nothing to say about religion. What we do find ourselves doing, perforce, if we're real human beings, if we're whole, if you're a full grown man, which is putting a lot, I think, out there. But I do need to summarize this very quickly, and this is how I choose to do so. There are only two kinds of men. And you can, then is a whole list of what you might say after that as a duality. Pretty much everything is a duality. As it rises in significance, it will become definitely a duality. And everything ends in a duality in the secrets of the universe. And that's quite an insight because it does invoke the new number system, which is a two-number system, and it invokes a different form of rationality than polar plus minus, yes, no, on, off, 180-degree linear logic. There is a conjugal logic which governs the universe, and it baffles us because we see naturally into the linear space much quicker, as proved by Euclid. We see the straight line much more rapidly than we see a perpendicular pair of lines. But the fact that there is such a thing as a pair of perpendicular lines that parameterizes the plane into an extrinsic geometry, essentially a grid, we've used that since the time of Euclid and developed it into an advanced mathematical system based on the wrong numbers. They're not actually wrong because it's superpositional, and linear numbers have served miracles to humankind. Technology is inarguable. Linear logic is fine. Your image that you're seeing of me broadcasting is composed using. Actually, I've been in the habit of saying it uses a linear number system, which is by default true because that's the only number system we can use for computation. So I should say we use the computable numbers in binary form. Now, what's interesting is that the computable numbers are defined by a different kind of number. They're powers of 2, and if you use the exponent to get the center, then the center would be 2 to the exponent 0. And we conventionalize that as the number 1. So 2 to the 0th power is 1. The point of saying that is the center of the system. That actually 1 is the center of the system. So the 2-ness of the number system itself requires 2 linear numbers, and that's called a fraction, but it's a specific kind of fraction. In the binary number set, which is used for your computer, those are the representable numbers. And the computer uses those numbers to get precise answers. When it's asked to do a calculation that doesn't result in a rational number, it does an approximation based on a certain mathematical extrapolation, really an algorithm, just simply a formula applied to either use the calculus or some form of reduction to get a number out on your screen. There had been Texas Instruments, not to single them out, everybody had this problem. In the construction of the first calculators, when you put in division by 0, it was unpredictable from manufacturer to, and even to brand name, that you can't. Your calculator has to actually catch that error, or it'll stop the calculator. It'll freeze the system. So it's disallowed by the universe. You can't ever divide by 0. And I did an incredible study on that during my couple of decades as a devoted computer scientist. That's how I made my living most of my life. So I am peripherally attached to the scientific community in that vague sense. I actually did computer science as a database manager. I didn't do the mathematics, in other words. And actually, computer science is not, strictly speaking, mathematics. It's more linguistic. It's really structural. And so you're relying a lot on what otherwise might be called geometry. But geometry, the way I use the word, is more specific than structure. Geometry, of course, is the study of structure. But structure and geometry are two different concepts. Geometry is some way of using structure so that you can employ a number system. And the Euclidean system has turned out to be quite useful. And it has led to space travel. It has led to computer technology. Nobody can argue with the single component number system that Euclid essentially led the way to. Now, what I discovered is the 2-component number system essentially proved to exist somehow by physics in the 20th century. And it turns out it's simply the discovery of curve space, which would have to be, because curvature is quite an infinite space, as indeed is linear space if you approach it strictly. It is also infinite, but it's infinite on a grid, which is quite peculiar because the edges of the grid just are lines sticking out into nothingness. But at the center, you also achieve a really amazing problem at the conversion of the perpendicular axes at 0, because it's the opposite of going into infinity with your stick lines. Now, when you convert to circular space, a lot of problems are solved instantly, but it's hard to see how it's useful in mathematics. So what I discovered was a 2-number system, which is essentially just fractions, but they're the binary fractions. And the point that I'm leading up to is that when you have 1 at the center of the system, all the numbers on either side of that multiply to that number. Just as on the line, all the numbers from 1 and -1 and 2 and -2, all the way to positive infinity and negative infinity, they add to 0. So they add to the Archimedean of the You can either call it the space or the object. In this case, it would be the object. And the Archimedean of the object is its center. It's its mathematical center, which then can be proved to be its geometric center, or vice versa. So the linearization of space is quite powerful because of the symmetry on the line. Now, the symmetry turns out to be illusory because there's no such thing as a negative quantity. So we had to abstract the notion of negativity in what otherwise is quantity space, which requires whole number counters in order to measure distance. But we imagine that we can do subtraction because we imagine there's such a thing as negative numbers. It turns out that's an illusion. So that undoes the invention of the negative numbers. I undid that. And then there is one more to remove. We have to get rid of 0. And so the universe provided that answer. I didn't make it up, invent it, or even discover it. Although technically that would be called a discovery, probably the greatest in the history of mathematics. But I don't want a prize for it. I'm not sure I even deserve a prize for it. But I do need to advertise my product, because that is what science does, whether you're looking for money or not. I just happen to not be looking for money, which is a strange thing to say, but I'm 70 years old and I don't care what you think about that. You're not going to rob me. But if you do, good for you. Others have. Okay, so what we have then is an exponential line. It's an exponential expansion, because 0 is now the center not of the linear system, balancing 1 and -1, balancing plus and minus infinity. That would be 0. In this system, the center is 1, sometimes called unity in the geometric sense. You can, of course, say that, but it's not a mathematical term for 1. It's more of a form term for 1, that it represents unity. Whatever you mean by that, you can certainly get away with saying that. I base my whole mathematical system on that truth because the universe does. The universe treats 1 as unity. So it is the center number, which is quite baffling, because now it's not a point. Instead, it's a surface. It turns out that that's a circle, and that circle reparameterizes the plane correctly for two-component space, which is light speed space. It's actually velocity space. In the case of light, you don't say velocity, you say speed, because light does not have a direction. It actually does, but you have to say it in a different geometric system. Light does have a direction. Oh my God. It's the most important discovery of all. What direction does light propagate in? Can you state that accurately? It's out. It goes out. And that seems like that's too much of a human vernacular word to be precise. What do you mean out? Out from what? Out from gravity. Out from the gravitational locked system. A photon, the way it's propagated in an electron ion system, will, I should say, for instance, in the sun, the way light is produced in the sun is from the presence of a proton. A proton will cause electrons to be attracted toward it, but then from that system of the electron-proton, which is hydrogen, you can force the emission of a photon by the application of a photon, and it will take the photon and then emit another photon. And that's actually how light propagates out to the surface of a star and propagates through space. Now, when it's propagating through space, it's not going in a linear direction. It's a spheric wave. And that is the quantum paradox, and that insight leads directly to the solution context. That light is spherical. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And it never has made sense. When I first was studying the propagation of... this is our lab cat who is attempting to be seated on the... Oh my God, well, that's a flattering position, honey. Why don't you... Can you... I'm stroking her back, so she's flexing her muscles, I guess you would have to say. The most beautiful cat in the world. And a rare view of this noble and graceful creature. There. I don't believe I've ever seen that particular view. Well, it's a study in anatomy. You're a scientist. You can handle it. All right. So tonight we're studying the other side of science, its most important service to humankind. I've proved that it only has one reasonable service to humankind, with a huge footnote for technology. And technology is a completely different animal that has to be treated ultra separately because something's going on and we don't know what it is, do we, Mr. Jones? No, we don't. We have no idea where science is going. We, as the human race, are certainly not in control of that process any longer. My cat loves me and she really likes attention. I think she's the most beautiful cat. I mean, all right, well, you deserve this. There she is. There's her more flattering. Look at that. Yeah, that is the most beautiful. I just really love her. And she knows that she's the star. And she's so shy. It's just unreal. I don't know why people like dogs at all. Dogs suck. Cats rule, dogs drool, man. There's just no way around it. Come on, just face it. I don't care if you have a puppy you love, the children love it. Dogs are filthy, dirty, rotten, barking, crapping. They don't bury their feces. What does that tell you? I don't know. Because I love dogs too, but cats don't make me laugh. All right, so the discovery of the oldest book in the world has got to be called one of the greatest discoveries in modern times. How modern? And what book? My cat just tried to leap to her perch on the half wall, but she launched from about 2 feet further away, but she was standing on a sliding board. So that's what you just heard. I'm so happy to, give you this variety show. But our cat is now settling somewhere away from the keyboard. She loves to get my attention, and what can you do? You have a heart. You need love. We all need love. Well, we do. We all need love. And we learn about our creator at some age, and then we're either taught to reject it, which is what's happening in the West, in the United States, etc., or you learn reality, that yes, there is a creator, and then you're ready for manhood. That is bar mitzvah. It's when you fully realize, to whatever threshold you define that as, that your creator is there and always was. And so you don't really need to worry, but maybe you do because you're in love. Maybe you love your creator and you'd like to approach your creator in some way that's a little harsh because he's at least in outer space, if not further, and you're on Earth covered with gravity and the pressure of air on your shoulders. You only get about 70 or 80 years, so whatever you're going to do, you better hurry. And we wake up into that. The presence of design and the realization of the presence of design in nature is the inculcation of the logical system for a male. When I say male, it is to allow me to use the word man. I never leave out women for anything unless I'm extremely explicit about it, as in the case of sexual conjugation to produce the next generation by the uniting of two different gametes, which is what Darwin did not know, and nobody in his day knew about the value of sex for plants and animals. They all do it. It's only when you get down to like single-celled organisms on Earth, just one cell instead of, in the case of humans, it's about 3 to 7 trillion cells. And it's been a difficult time trying to guess how many cells there are, because who can guess how many cells are in the average human body? That turns out to be quite a difficult undertaking, as you can tell by the range. For a while it was 3 trillion. It was always known to be in the trillions. But how many trillions? Does it matter? That's called an order when it's in the trillions. Well, 3 or 7 trillion? Yeah. I mean, that may or may not be significant, but I would just say, hearing the word trillion, I think I have an idea of how many cells are in the body to a certain order of approximation, which is quite valuable, especially in chronology, which we're going to talk about now. because that turns out to be the crux of the most difficult and important issue of all time. The crux of the matter of what has come to be a loggerheads between religion and science, which we cannot permit under any circumstances. Whoever is raising the beef between religion and science, somebody is going to suffer forever for whatever trick they're trying to pull. And we know who's trying to pull the trick. If indeed that's the right way to characterize, this could be totally unfair. Perhaps we'll see. We're going to actually examine the evidence. So what does science say that has raised this incredible cosmic issue? It's now in the cosmic court, and God is on my side. I'm supposed to be even-handed. I intend to be, but I am going to fucking do my job and answer this goddamn problem. What is the problem? Well, the problem is, as you know, you can summarize it. It's between two theories of the origin of man. Not the animals, not the plants, not the life form, not the Earth or the solar system or anything else. Where did man originate? Mankind. Men and women. Children, men and women, old men, old women, young men, young women, generation after. Where did that start? And when we say where, we're referring to a timeline. A timeline. Holy smokes. Well, then we have to look into the past. We're forced to it. And this is a game. I'm dead serious about that. I know it sounds frivolous. Or perhaps, equally bad. It's inconsequential. I'm just making an observation. He says, ho-hum, and let's go on with science. No. We have to really slow down and examine the overall situation we're in. What we need to know is the origin of man, and it's now a matter of life and death at every level in every sense, is which answer is correct. Everything depends on the answer. Everything does. Because we've determined we must know our origin. Why? To get the timeline. To get the timeline. When did humans appear on the earth? Well, as you know, this involves biology and geology, paleontology, archaeology, history, which covers all of those, and tries to assimilate it into a narrative or a tale. Where do we come from? However you begin, you've got to address this. You can't just say, it was millions of years ago. That's ridiculous. And so I'm just going to tell you point blank so we can begin this final approach sequence to the most important piece of information ever divulged to man. I discovered that. So we're leading up to that. So perhaps there's a little emotion. I've got to rein that in. But I'm glad that you saw that, because I'm going to give you the answer to the deepest secret of all time. And yes, it's science, because science defines what religion is. And it does so in this way. When you go to define what religion is, you have to have a rational explanation. It can't just be because Jesus was born in a manger. That may be part of a narrative that makes sense, but you can't just say, well, God is a Trinity, or Jesus is God, or something just out of nowhere. But you see, it's not out of nowhere. It's from a narrative. So where did that narrative originate? Which narrative? Which narrative? Where do humans come from? Okay. The correct answer is Adam. That's where humans come from. Adam, who is a well-known, proven to exist character. How can we prove that? You might be dubious, especially, well, certainly if you were born in the West. That is not accepted, ever, no matter what the proof. No, there was not an Adam. There was not any such person. There was not that man. That's not how humans began. It's not true. Is it not? Who has the weight of scientific evidence? Now it's a war between a group of genital liars. I'm sorry, congenital. Perhaps even genital liars these days. You never know about anything. You can't trust anybody. Oh, there's no creator, so there's no Adam. But you know that human beings evolved from hominid. By definition, whatever came before humans was some kind of hominid. When? When did that happen? Between 30 and 300 million years ago is the current guess. Do you know where that guess comes from? Lululand. There is zero evidence of that. And all the evidence written into the earth, both biologically and geologically, proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that the narrative of Adam and Eve is absolutely true. How do we know that? Because of the flood. Because of the flood. That's in Wikipedia. You can't get out of that. But you're still capable of perfect irrationality and turning into an idiot if you believe radiometric dating the way it's interpreted. Radiometric dating is just about the craziest idea ever thought of for a metric, that you're going to measure the decay rate of carbon-12 isotope into carbon-14. I think it would be the other way around. Carbon-14, which somehow magically gets locked into organic systems, and then when you dig up an organic body like a bone, you can test for the percentage of C12 as a ratio of C14, and somehow from that, you say that you're able to prove that all the evidence of when man appeared on Earth is wrong, but your theory is right. And now you're saying that's the only theory. So you're making it law. You can't. You're wrong. So that's how I begin this fair, even-handed inquest into which side is right. Western scientists who began in England about a century and a half ago, or 6,000 to 10,000 years of human written history in a direct transmission from the very first man. We have a direct transmission from Adam. And the current myth among infidel, pagan, atheist, mechanist, determinist liars is that is impossible. Because there's no creator. That's their reason for their insistence. Because now they're the new atheism. And if you think I made that up or this is some kind of joke, would to God that it were. But actually, praise God for this magnificent game. What a contest! It's a battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. And the sons of darkness are now arranging themselves, organizing themselves, forming up to defeat the idea of a creator. Wow! That's going to be a fight to the death! It already is, darlings. And in the next video, I'll tell you about the most important discovery ever discovered about that transmission that proves once and for all who's right. And no scientist will ever be able to disprove this. I'm going to answer the challenge to Islam. Whoever opposes Islam, I will get you. And if I don't, my master will. But I'll try to get you first, so that children learn from the sight of you being choked out by me on the mat with you going unconscious in the most humiliating way. That's going to be how this contest ends. With me kicking your head, you atheist. You're going to go down in flames to the proportion you thought you had a lock-nut, Loctite case against God. You have got a long life ahead, I pray. But I'll tell you what. You don't deserve to live if you believe in any kind of human speciation, because that has been disproved. So if you say that humans speciated, you're a liar. You're not a scientist, and I forbid you from ever talking about science again. You assholes! Don't you ever touch the altar again, or your arm will be chopped off! Motherfuckers! Thank you very much. I hope you tune in for the next video where I will be much calmer. Thank you very much. Keep looking up.